Hello everyone, this is Dana and welcome to the Orchid Hut. It's getting kind of late in the afternoon here, but I've been procrastinating just a little bit on repotting this Oncidium orchid, and it was something I wanted to accomplish today. It was one of those days where nothing really went as planned. All of my morning errands and appointments ran late. I was rushing home to get the shade cloth up for my outside orchids, and I've just sort of been going at a hurried pace all day. But this is something that I wanted to get accomplished because I've been putting it off for more than a week now. So today's video is about repotting this Oncidium orchid. So we're going to go through some of the preliminaries here, and then I will cut the camera because one of the things I will need to do is get this media wet so that the sphagnum moss that the orchid was originally planted in will release from the roots a bit easier. And I also want to see which of these roots turn green, if any, because I may need to be doing a little bit of trim work once we get the media off of the orchid. You'll notice on this one that there is a bloom spike that will need to be cut, so the cinnamon is on the ready to take care of that. And because this Oncidium is what I would call a climber, it's sort of climbing up out of the pot as it puts on new growths each year, we will kind of need to be figuring out how to get this portion of the orchid closer to the media, because you can see the roots that were produced this year really aren't even down there, and that's not ideal. So then one of the other decisions that we'll need to make is pot size. So once all of the old media is off, I have a few pots ready so that we can check to see which one is the best fit. And then the media for today. So since this is an Oncidium, the media that I use is pre-mixed for Oncidiums, and it works well for me. Many growers put their Oncidiums in a higher concentration of sphagnum moss media with maybe just a little bit of bark and other kinds of like rock mixed in. But because I am a frequent waterer and I'm in a very humid environment, the sphagnum moss potting percentage is pretty much non-existent in what I choose to use. But the next maybe best thing, especially if you're finding that moss doesn't work for you, is a mix like this. So it's pretty small orchid bark pieces, a little bit of sponge rock. There's also some, I think, what they call lava rock in here. And I don't know if you can see it right here, but there are little tiny chips of cork bark. So this is the media that works well for me around the fine roots of an Oncidium, so that's what I'll be using today. However, this media is also rather dusty. It just seems to have a lot of finer particles in it because it's a finer mix to begin with. And what I have found sometimes is that all of those dust particles will settle in the bottom of your orchid pot as you continue to water the orchid, and the entire pot will be clogged up. You know, there won't be any way for it to have air circulation down there because the dust from the media has clogged up the bottom of the pot. So what I do to offset that a little bit is I put some large chunks of cork in the bottom of the pot first, and it somehow seems to allow that dusty particle stuff from the media to wash through a bit better, and it prevents the bottom of the pot from getting clogged up. So I'll either use cork bark or really large chips of regular orchid bark, chunks I guess you would call it. Okay, so I will take a little break here, I'm going to go put some water on this orchid so that the sphagnum moss gets a bit moist and I can see what's happening with the roots a bit better. And then I'll be back to pot the orchid with you. Okay, so the Oncidium has had about a 10-minute soak, and we're going to attempt to take it out of the pot here. There it comes. And it's got a pretty good root system. And in fact, you know, I thought that this was potted mostly in sphagnum moss, but now it looks like it was really more of a, almost kind of a peat mix with maybe a little bit of small bark in it. So that's actually a good thing, because I don't think this would have been staying as wet as sphagnum. Here's a piece. So the sphagnum may actually be more on the inside. The roots are in pretty good shape. You can see a lot of new root tips. They're not green because the pot was brown in color, and even though this orchid was outside, it would not have allowed the roots to photosynthesize and be green, but I can tell the little white root tips are actually pretty healthy. Yeah, here comes more sphagnum moss. So maybe the moss was on the inside and the peat was on the outside. I don't know. So, this again is tedious work. I will continue to kind of pull as much of this away as possible. When it begins to get too tedious, I will fast forward the video, and when I think I've worked out as much as I can, then I will take it over to the sink and rinse it so that we can have an even better view of the roots. I had someone ask me the other day why I didn't wear gloves to do this, and I guess it's just because touching this doesn't really bother me. I was a rural kid growing up. I sort of lived on a farm, more or less, between my own parents' home and my grandparents'. I was used to being outdoors a lot and working in the garden and working with animals, and so I just suppose I got used to having my hands in dirt, and it really just doesn't bother me. In fact, putting gloves on sort of feels like it even hinders my ability to do some of this work. So I just go at this with my bare hands. Okay, I think the video fast forwarding will start about now. Okay, so this is about as much as I can do without having the water to help me flush the rest of it out. I am going to go ahead and remove the stake for the flower spike, because that is just going to be in my way. And when I'm back from the sink, we'll have another look. Okay, so the mess has been cleaned up, so I can start again here. The Oncidium has been rinsed off under the sink, and I want to point out how pronounced this upward growth is for this orchid. So these two pseudobulbs was when the orchid was very, very young, and that root system is completely gone. There are no roots left on those first two pseudobulbs. So in a minute I will just be cutting that away. if I leave them, first of all, they're not really helping the plant that much anymore. There's no root system there. And because I'm going to be trying to get this orchid a bit farther down in the media, these would be buried, and then that could lead to rot and other kinds of problems. So I'll be wanting to take those off. This pseudobulb also does not have any roots from it anymore right down here, but it does still have leaves. It does still have energy storage in this bulb. So I will probably be leaving this one unless it just causes me problems with getting the rest of the orchid far enough down in the pot. And then if you just look at this orchid is growing straight up year after year. So with each successive pseudobulb growth, it's going higher and higher in the air. So I'm going to have to figure out how to orient this down a bit. Okay, and even on this side, it's just a complete, upward growth year after year. Okay, so roots are in good shape for the most part. The new roots, you can tell on this oldest pseudobulb, even greened up some because they had been for the most part out of the pot. The other roots look good. There are a lot of new root tips on there. I'm not even going to try to cut away any of the little bit of root that may be dead or damaged because most of that from the older part of the plant is missing anyway. All right, so let's flame our pruning cutters. And first, we're going to get this bloom spike off because it's just sticking up and causing problems. You cut it as close as you can without damaging any of the surrounding leaves. That is perfectly okay. These two pseudobulbs are going to come off. I'm thinking this one is going to cause me a problem as well because it's like so far down. If we look at pot size here, the original pot that it came in was pretty small, so I don't want to get much larger than that pot. The roots actually do need to fill up the pot. And you can probably put it at a bit of a tilt and it'll be okay. All right, so I made a decision to go ahead and keep this. So let's use this smallest pot. This pot would be too large. This pot I think would be too shallow. Let's just try it. Yeah, maybe a little bit too shallow. So we're going to put our cork bark in the bottom of this pot. So that's what that looks like. We will go ahead and add a little bit of the media on top of the cork bark. And let's just check. You can see right here that it's wanting to put on some more new roots. Anything that's a dry sheath can be pulled off, but this orchid really doesn't have all that much of that compared to some. Okay. So let's see how this goes. We want to get as much of that root system in the media as possible, and we want to try to put put it at a bit of a tilt so that that lowest pseudobulb is not buried, but the newer growth is also closer to the media. So we're going to be putting it at a slight bit of an angle like this. Okay, so this is going to require a lot of sort of tapping and shaking because this media will work itself down into those finer roots, but it takes a little bit of extra effort to make sure that there's not a lot of unnecessary air pockets in there. And this is another advantage to using a clear or opaque pot, because you can actually see what's going on. Telly! Someone get the telly. So if we look in the side of the pot here, we can see that the little bark chips and the little cork particles have worked their way down around the root system. And so we will just continue to kind of pot at a slant here. And I will need to go and get a bit more media and finish topping off this pot. So I'll be back in just a bit. So I would like to know, and you can let me know down in the comments, does it happen to anyone else that you never seem to get enough media for the job the first time? I think, you know, it happens to me because my media is stored out in the garage. And I think, oh, well, I don't want to bring that whole bag in. I'll just get enough to use, and the next thing you know, it's not really enough, and I have to make another trip back out to the garage anyway. Okay, so back with more media. Now you can kind of see the slant here happening just a bit. And we will have to check at the end to see if there's going to be any staking needed. Let's give this another good tap. Okay, getting close. Well, that root just doesn't want to be in the pot. Okay. All right. So let's sort of look at the finished product here. First of all, it's pretty stable in the pot. I will watch it the next couple of days to see if it starts to lean, and then I'll add a stake if I need to. But I think we achieved the goal here. So this oldest pseudobulb is not potted too deep, but the new growth and the successive growth, hopefully next year, will be close enough to the pot to get the roots down in the media. This is just going to be an orchid, I think, that has to be maybe repotted more frequently than not, simply because of its growth habit. But in any case, it looks happy for now. Thanks for watching. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe with the button in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. Thanks for watching. A final drink of water and this orchid is ready to go back outside. This orchid was featured in a few other videos previously, and I will put those links down in the description.